Let's now move over to North America, where Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney met with US President Donald Trump at the White House, delivering a clear message that Canada is not for sale. This marked Carney's first meeting with Trump since winning the April 28th election on a promise to oppose US tariffs and reject talk of any annexation of Canada. Carney told Trump to stop referring to Canada as the 51st state. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
Despite their sharp differences, both leaders kept a friendly tone during their Oval Office photo op. Trump described the meeting as great, while Carney called it constructive. They agreed to begin talks on a new economic and security relationship. Let's hear both leaders' reactions.
No, I don't see any tension either. We get along very well with both. They just got to pay a little more money, you know. They're getting away with things that they shouldn't be, and they understand. We had a great meeting today, actually.
Trump and I met today as leaders of two sovereign, independent nations. And I want to thank the President and the members of his cabinet that attended for welcoming me.
Trump thinks that the US doesn't need Canadian products. He also repeated his claims about the US trade deficit with Canada, despite data showing Canada's trade surplus dropped in March after new tariffs took effect. Trump's tariffs on steel, aluminium and auto parts have already impacted Canadian exports, which fell by $3.7 billion in March. While Trump called the USMCA trade deal fine, Carney said some parts of it need to be updated. Let's listen in to what Carney said about the tariff deal.
Very complex negotiation about a wide range of issues. And it's, as I said before I came here, I wouldn't have expected white smoke coming out of this meeting. That was not my expectation, that because of the nature of the negotiation. So you don't expect to have specific progress as things move along, even when you're making progress, because that's why it's a global negotiation.
We are once again joined by Adit Kothari, foreign affairs expert, to discuss this in more detail. Adit, Mark Carney, many say, won Canada's presidential prime minister election because of the American president and the current relationships that Trump is driving between the US and Canada. What did you make of how the two heads of state interacted with each other?
Actually, it was a massive surprise, to say the least. I mean, you wouldn't expect that kind of a very cold and a very sort of amicable kind of a relationship that they actually demonstrated in that half-an-hour meeting. And, you know, people were expecting a lot of fireworks, especially with regards to how Trump has, you know, repeatedly tried to demean the Canadian sovereignty by calling it the 51st state of the United States. You know, one would expect a lot of fireworks, but, you know, I think Mark Carney was fantastic in downplaying it while, you know, keeping his position very upright and yet not offending the president. You know, his anecdote of, you know, certain properties are just no-go zones, and, you know, we work with partnerships and they're not for sale. I think that anecdote, you know, is a classic lesson for many world leaders on how to deal with someone as diabolical as President Trump, as mercurial as President Trump. So it's a classic lesson from that perspective. I think Mark Carney did a wonderful job to sort of diffuse the situation and yet, you know, have his end of the bargain held high. You know, President Trump was gracious enough to acknowledge, you know, Mark Carney's victory as well, you know, considering where the Liberal Party was when Justin Trudeau was the Prime Minister, and he acknowledged that, you know, this victory even supersedes that of his own. So, you know, that kind of conversation, that sort of discourse showed that they share a sense of bonhomie, which will, you know, ease out the tensions at some point of time.
Adit, as we've said previously, Mark Carney has been a staunch critic of President Donald Trump. It was one of his leading campaign pushes to be. However, Trump received him in a surprisingly positive way, hasn't really said anything bad about the man itself. Do you think Trump respects Carney, and why Do you think that could be so?
So I think the respect is twofold. One is on the basis of the clear mandate that Mark Carney has received from the Canadian people. This sort of a mandate, especially after the kind of doldrums that we saw the Liberal Party in, where there were absolutely no chances of them regaining power. From there, from absolutely down in the dumps to the complete trajectory change. I think that demonstrates that he needs to respect Mark Carney for the kind of mandate that he's received. So that is number one. And B, what Mark Carney basically brings onto the table, with his stint in the UK as the governor of the central bank, or with however he sort of delved into the economic scenario in Canada, and the way he sort of shaved and sort of gave through very difficult times for Canada. So I think that respect is twofold, and we could see that they understand each other's positions, and there will be some concessions made, but those concessions will only be coming after a certain point of time, once they've gone into deeper sort of assessments of the trade deal. I mean, President Trump's been very clear about the fact that you can't have it both ways. You cannot have a trade deal with the United States and yet not pay the United States for the kind of goods and services that they're providing to the Canadians.
Adeek Kothari, thank you very much for your insight.